Every Monday evening at 6 p.m.
Good evening and welcome back. Thank you so much for being tuned in. And as I mentioned earlier, I have Carl Janse in studio with me here in Sandton. Carl is a researcher at the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change. Carl, welcome back. Welcome back. It feels like you've been here before because you and I've met each other before. So welcome in studio with me and tell us more about the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change, please.
Thank you so much for having me. So the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change is a non-profit organization dedicated to online narratives, narrative manipulation, coordinated networks across a variety of thematic areas such as social and political division, social prejudice, public health and safety, as well as sustainability. I myself, my primary focus is within the He Cares project, where we focus really on gender equality and looking at the norms, the values, and the conversations that are happening online in that space. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Carl, I mean, as a researcher, I'm sure that you are always amazed by things that you find, right?
Always, always. The evolution of the conversation is so interesting. It's so nuanced and very local, very contextual as well.
Yes, and I have to say that I think it's sometimes we underestimate what power there is in the research, the data, but before we get to that, all the work that goes into getting to the research questions and how you apply it and the value that it carries, and then of course having your voice, you know, like the credibility of your organization. And for me, that is so, so important. So Carl, thank you. We look forward to learning from you tonight. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions regarding the studies that you've done. And I'm very, very curious and excited to learn from you tonight. So before we get there, let's quickly go to a quick announcement and then we'll be back. We'll come back for your song. So let's talk about this very touching but important issue, Carl. I'm so thankful again. Thank you for being in studio with me. So, and I saw that the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change issued a press release on 9 July this year with the title, After 12 is Lunch, Unmasking a Disturbing New Language of Abuse Online. What are some of the biggest online safety challenges that families in South Africa are facing right now, according to your research? And just give us a little bit of context about it, please.
Yes. So, well, we have the ones that we are acutely aware of, which is, of course, your cyberbullying, harassment. But in the context of the work we've done this year, what we found is the non-consensual sharing of images or videos, as well as, of course, as illustrated in that press release, child predation online. And this is really across many of the platforms that we find: public social media, your X, some of the more closed off Telegram as well, and then of course Facebook, where there was a recent court case which ordered them to remove some of those. WhatsApp, we've also found where we find the proliferation of child sexual abuse material. Yeah.
Okay, and in terms of this study, the specific one, After 12 is Lunch, and I think the title is so catching. It says Unmasking a Disturbing New Language of Abuse Online. I mean, cyberbullying and harmful content are often mentioned, like you say, as a growing concern. But what did your research reveal about how these issues are affecting young people, and how can families respond constructively?
Yeah. Well, we've long known that cyberbullying, harassment, these aspects have a negative impact on children and young people developing, as well as depression and all sorts of disorders, anxiety and the like. What we see here is also the exposure issue. And when families or children or younger people go on social media, they're exposed to age inappropriate content, which will necessarily affect their development in life, will necessarily impact and leave trauma in some cases. I can speak from my own experience doing this research that it was quite traumatic content that we encountered as a CABC
Can
while
imagine.
investigating it.
I can imagine that. And is there anything specific that comes to mind that you would like to highlight?
In terms of what we found,
Yeah.
well, I think the one thing that stood out to me was how freely CSAM, if I may use it, child sexual abuse material is shared
Yes.
online and is proliferated online. That was quite shocking to see that there was no stopgaps in place, no moderation of it, essentially.
I can imagine, and when you think of people who do the work every day to moderate, to look for content, to make sure that this, whatever is on it, because we know in the background with these platforms, they actually do have, a lot of it is AI, and then it gets escalated if it needs to be seen by a human to just determine whether or not it's okay or not. But people who see and view this, to moderate, I think it's so important that they also look after themselves, right?
No, definitely. And on top of that, I'd also say that if you don't have local moderators, if you don't have individuals that understand the context, the job becomes doubly difficult. For example, the title of this is After 12 is Lunch. That is coded language to say that after a girl child reaches the age of 12, essentially, men or individuals are free to have sexual relations with her, which is something you can only know with the context behind it.
Okay, my whole body is in chills right now if you say it like that, and that's why I think it's so important to understand the language.
Yeah.
And it says, after 12 is lunch, and this is part of those moments where it's so sobering, where we really feel like, okay, we are very much protected, but if you are in this field, you realize these things happen. They really happen. And I want to quickly pivot to another one that you did, another study. You named it the state of child predation online. What does that mean?
Well, that study is really essentially looking at how common, how easy, how vast that child predation is. So with it, we looked at the narratives online in respect of relationships and age differences and age gaps, and we really wanted to distill the type of conversations happening, which is an indicator of our societal values and our societal norms. Conversations we have on social media is an indicator of that. And we wanted to look at the general perception of these relationships and looking at things like teenage pregnancy and how individuals respond to teenage pregnancy online and these underage relationships.
Sure, that is all such important issues and things that we see on a daily basis if you read the news. And so let's talk about the current landscape. Based on your findings, what are the most concerning trends in online predation in South Africa over the past year?
That's a loaded question. I think the most concerning that we found was the evolution of child predation online. And the notch is being turned up. Social media is starting to take explicit content more seriously. We've seen the court cases come out, is research being published and the like. However, for every reaction is a counter reaction. And so we've seen these bad actors move. If the way that they proliferate this content has shifted, has evolved to evade this detection. So if it can't be public anymore, they bring that closer to a closed group. So they close off the Telegram group, for example.
Yes.
Or they post a link to WhatsApp, which is encrypted, and tighten their networks and add additional, thereby sort of evading the attempts at it. And that really was the most concerning trend we noted.
Sure. And they always seem to be a step ahead.
Yeah.
And that is concerning and alarming. And I must say, with the cybercrime victims that I've supported as well, there's always certain cases that unfortunately happen before you get to the point where you need to find these solutions, and by then the damage has been done, right?
Yes, 100%.
So let's talk about the narratives that normalize harm. I think, well, the word narratives already, that's one that we can unpack for hours, but that normalize harm. So you identify online narratives that sexualizes minors or minimize statutory rape. What do these narratives look like in everyday posts, and how can we spot them and then challenge them?
Addressing that first point of that question, I'll use by way of example. And what we found when engaging in this research is that things like the female body is still very much perceived as one that does not have autonomy and is not free to make decisions of their own. And so when we see these conversations come up, marriage and bearing children is viewed as the ultimate goal.
Okay.
And then that is sort of placed in this false dichotomy with promiscuity.
Okay.
So they are compared against one another. So you either get married at a very young age and you're a good wife and you're submissive, or you go into a promiscuous life. And that serves to create this false dilemma where getting married as young as possible is the preferred route for a child. So a lot of that came out of this research where we found older men, 50, 60 year old men getting married with younger girls in their 18, which brings into question the power dynamics, the coercion aspect.
Sure.
In terms of the normalization of child predation, by way of example, again, when we look at teenage pregnancies, we never actually call that out for what it is.
So what should we call it out as?
Statutory rape.
Yes.
It's statutory rape. Instead, it's a softened blow. We soften the blow.
And yet there's so many projects and campaigns going to address the issue, which maybe it shouldn't be aimed at the teenagers at school, but at the adults.
Agree?
Who are, part of the pregnancy story here, because like you say. Sure, Carl.
And that's, I do want to touch on that as well, which we also found coming out of this report in respect of the teenage pregnancy debate and conversations happening online. There is an element of victim blaming. When teenage pregnancy comes up or statutory rape conversations come up on social media, we find certain individuals question or post and say, okay, but we don't know, did she consent?
Mm-hmm.
A child can't consent. And it's the decision of the onus is on the adult to be responsible to not engage in that. So it's shifting that focus.
You're very right. And then throughout these campaigns that we see, so often the aim, the initial messaging gets twisted by people who comment, by these trolls online, and people who actually then misconstrue the message to, like you say, blame the victim.
Yes.
And ultimately, what happens to the victim then? They become reserved and actually afraid. Like so often, I'm sure it leads to, or it could lead to violence. It could lead to fear, because what's going to happen to the victim, and it's not only girls. I'm sure we're talking about boys as well. But Carl, that's really, really scary. And in terms of, like you say, when we talk about the narratives, when we start normalizing harm, I think it becomes more acceptable and people think it's okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything else in your study that, while we're talking about this, that you would like to highlight?
There's also, you mentioned some of the effects, and I would like to touch on, I think, also a very insidious, very harmful effect of all of this, and that's the silencing aspect.
Okay.
So individuals don't actually speak up about what they've gone through, or they pull into themselves, and that's what society wants to do in certain cases. In patriarchal societies, they want to silence women, and it's a very insidious harm. And of course, we are speaking it in more the effect of on women and children, but it is extended to men. Gender-based violence can be experienced by men, but in a patriarchal society, the goal is to silence women.
Yeah. And then we listen to statistics, and you wonder, those statistics, are they real? Are they actually true? Because they are obviously representing and highlighting the cases that we are aware of.
Yeah.
Meantime, back in this, like you say, victims who are not willing to speak because they are afraid, we don't know about it.
Exactly.
And it's not as easy to say, well, just go tell someone or go to the police. Back in, if you really look at the reality of this issue, it's not an easy thing.
No.
And there's so many dynamics around it that I think everybody's situation is different.
Yeah.
And I really want to say I'm really sorry if someone's listening and you're going through a hard time, or this is part of your story, maybe it's part of your history. I'm really sorry, because this is tough. And what is encouraging is that there is help out there, but when you're in it, it must feel very, very lonely.
Yeah.
And which brings me to something else that was part of your research, and I'm just referring to it again, it's the state of child predation online. The race baiting and deflection. You found that conversations often shift into racial blame. Why is this harmful, and what's a constructive way for listeners to keep the focus on child protection rather than deflection?
Yes, and you hit the nail on the head by noting that it is actually deflection. And this was one of the findings that hit you out of the blue. We weren't expecting to find something like that. And what we found is, online, if the perpetrator was a certain color, immediately everyone would swarm in and say, oh yes, we expect it from this type of person or this community. And it's very contextual, very situation based. If the person was a different color, you'd find those exact same comments under that post as well. Oh no, this is normal in the community, normal in so it's unsurprising. And then we also found the deflection on, okay, but why are we focusing on this one instance that is reported in the news? Why do when there's so much other crime happening in the country, theft, murder, and the like? And this serves absolutely no constructive purpose in this conversation, because the focus is on the child. The fact that we see it, and it's not a South African issue, it's a global issue.
Yes,
And
I think it's important to note, right?
Yes, it's a global issue, and we want to hone in on holding individuals accountable, whether you pink. It's holding them accountable for their actions and ensuring that the children get the protection that they need, and that we are addressing the values and norms in this country that lead to this, because ultimately it is symptomatic of what the underlying values and norms of our culture in our country.
And it makes us think, if we make it practical, and when we view anything online again, to think with the right lens.
Yes.
And remember what you just said, like if you saw someone from a different race, culture, what would you have said? Do we need to maybe check our own hearts and the way we perceive it and the way we react, which is a very tough thing to do. Very, very tough. Let's listen to the rest of Adele. Thank you so much, Adele, for waiting. And we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Every Monday evening at 6 p.m.
Welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed the song Easy on Me by Adele. And thank you for staying tuned. We have Kyle Janse in studio here in Sandton Land, as we often refer to our home. And Kyle is a researcher at the Center for Analytics and Behavioral Change. And we're talking about the very, very important topics that are very uncomfortable sometimes. But before the break, we were talking about a study named The State of Child Predation Online. And I want to continue a little bit further with that, please. I want to talk to you and ask you about the CSAM, the Child Sexual Abuse Material, the proliferation on social media and platforms. So you mentioned a small number of accounts driving a lot of harmful content, and you mentioned the platforms earlier. But what are the red flags of accounts that sexualize minors, and how should listeners report or respond safely?
Yeah, so as with many of these, whether it's loosely coordinated or coordinated networks, it's generally quite a few of them that in even similar observations can be in hate speech, incitement, and trying to undermine democracy. And for these sets of accounts involved in child predation, generally you're looking at overly sexualized content, you're looking at explicit content that is targeted locally. So then you find things like slang or vernac in the posts, and the accounts, whether coordinated or uncoordinated, speak to one another because they'll use the exact same keywords, they'll use the exact same hashtags and those indicators, which is also to bring the audience. I know if I'm looking for this, if I put that keyword in, it's going to either bring me an account or posts that are child predation or CSAM content online. And so those are the types of red flags you are looking at. And sometimes it is also nested in other explicit content as well.
That's the big challenge, right?
Yes, that's the big challenge. And in terms of reporting, it's following the platform's reporting, which can sometimes also be a hit and miss based on their community policies, based on how they see it, based on the amount of moderators they have working on their platform. So it's quite tough, and that's why when the conversation of the how do we respond to this, we need to look at it broader. We need to go a bit further than just on that platform.
And if I can just say from the platform's point of view, something that I notice that they do, like because I work closely with them, I know that they really go the extra mile to see if they can find the content before it even hits the actual platforms, right? But it's still can be missed. And the fact that people are even trying to do it, I mean, it is about against the community rules, and we know it's against the law, it's a criminal offense, but still people do it. And that's where you just sometimes feel like, wow, and then in terms of the research, was there anything else that was quite surprising when it came to this, like on the social platforms and the way it is either missed or hidden?
And that, I think it also touches on what you said earlier in respect of the platforms, because these actors, they're trying to get their harmful content out there, and they'll use the local nuances, the local slang, in order to evade that moderation attempts and to evade awareness of the platform. And so when you look at those nuances, you look at those subtle forms that come about, those are really your points where they'll use a different term, or they'll change a letter in a word in order to evade moderation attempts. So that was also some of the interest of the 12 is lunch being another example of that.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that holds a lot.
It holds weight, carries weight, and I mean, this is the purpose of the research, the studies that you do, so that we can get a clear understanding of what the current situation is, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about law enforcement and public tools, because I think it's important that we understand what role can we play, how to navigate this space. So the report references momentum around offender registries and prosecutions,
Yeah.
which is really good to know more about. And then what changes would most help families right now, and how can the public support responsible policy without compromising privacy? So let's unpack both those sides. What, in terms of the report that reference momentum around offender registries and prosecutions.
I think I'll take a step back there now, and I'd say we first need to capacitate our law enforcement bodies. Our cybercrimes units are immature at this point. There is a lot of work being done by them. However, for the scale of social media and several social media organizations operating in this country, that is the first issue that we need to deal with, is our cybercrime investigations and capacitating our police force in order to deal with it effectively. Only then, once we have the evidence, we've got the police is capacitated, then we can look at the prosecution, and the natural tendency of that is that you will have higher prosecution. And I mean, there's been a slew of articles coming out recently where these individuals have been caught with CSAM in their homes or on their computers, which is a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
So that's the first step there. And then what we as families, did I get that correct?
Yes.
Also another tough one, I think it's having those digital protections in place.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can have that conversation without again going back to our gender norms and values in this country, and what we as society think of gender equality. Do we support it really, if this is what we're finding on social media? So to safeguard our children, it would be to put in those digital protections, to have the conversations. I think most importantly, to have the gender equality conversation with the children, and then having the adequate internet and social media protections in place to protect them.
Yes, and you're touching on something that I talk about a lot, is the fact that we need to be involved and have those conversations. But what I'm also hearing you say, and this is something that is a values-driven conversation,
Yes.
and our values might not align, and people don't have the same values in their different homes and environments. So I think that's something I personally find very challenging when I speak at schools and with audiences, because I feel, or I see that, what's okay in one person's home might not be in another. And to then translate that on social media and to see how people react and respond. And that's why, we aim to have peace online, but I think it will be very tough to reach that point, considering the value systems and the fact that there are no rules in cyberspace. Yes, there are community rules on the platforms we use, but not if you think about the internet. And we're not even opening the can of worms talking about dark web.
Yeah.
So this is really, really quite, on the one hand, encouraging to know that law enforcement is happening. And I know from, the work that I've done with the industry and really with the police, who I often call the cyber cowboys. They do amazing work. They do put people behind bars. We're just not aware of it always, right, Carl? Because it's like under wraps. They are undercover because they still need to find the other parts of that bigger puzzle. Or puzzle is too kind of a word, what's the word we're going to use? The poison.
Yeah, I think we must also consider the vast scale of social media, and the internet in general. And so, of course, our cybercrimes, they are working. They're doing some really good work.
Yeah.
but also the scale of the issue is so broad. And then I also like to take it a step up and look at government regulation and how government can step in order to prevent these harms from occurring. I mean, if we just look at the recent law passed by Australia where they essentially banned 16-year-olds from accessing social media.
Yes.
And we've got explicit, you can't advertise anything explicit on any of our televisions. Broadcasting prohibits that. And looking at similar protections or regulations that we could implement on social media, because it is open for everyone. So, and the vast scale of it again, you need to look at a broader societal solution, and we look at norms, but we also look at regulations.
Yes, and the fact that we are, the moment you step into cyberspace, it's global.
Yes.
You know, you're speaking to a global audience, and you are part of the internet, not just South African jurisdiction. So I quickly want to touch on something else before our time runs out. Another article you issued on 6 October this year, 2025. It was called Click, Pay, Exploit, the online marketplace for child sexual abuse. And in the article, you linked a report titled The State of Child Predation on South Africa's Social Media, like we discussed, right? But and it's part of the project that you mentioned earlier, eCare or eCare South Africa or eCare ZA. Yeah. The report mentions harmful or unsafe content. How can parents and caregivers recognize warning signs that a child may have been exposed to such material?
Very tough question. I'd say if you start seeing change in behavior and content of conversation, I'd certainly say is probably the primary giveaway in inverted commas. Like I said, what you get exposed to on social media can be quite age inappropriate.
Definitely.
So looking out for those conversations that a 13-year-old, for example, shouldn't be having these types of conversations or making these types of remarks. And that would be an early warning sign that they've probably been exposed to something that they should not have been on social media.
And you know, we always think of the worst, like you and I, we've discussed really heavy topics, right? But something that stood out for me this weekend when I was at the G20, the Children 20 pre-summit event, and engaging with the youth, they actually said something quite interesting to me. They said that they don't like the fact that they get advertisements, for instance, about gambling, and they have to watch the full ad, and then it says it's not under 18s, right? And they're like, but I've already seen it. You've already exposed me. You've already made me interested and curious about it, and now you tell me I can't do it. Yeah. And it was a very fascinating way of seeing the messaging that we share with them. So we need to really think carefully, not just all the horrible, evil, and criminal things, but also the daily things that we expose them to that are on billboards. Criminal things, but also the daily things that we expose them to that are on billboards, on our TV screens, and just in life, right? So is there something that you want to wrap up and leave the audience with, Carl? I know that it's heavy work you do, and thank you for the work that you guys do, and please thank the rest of your team, because it is a team's effort. But we encourage you to continue, and we cheer you on. Is there something that you would like to say as encouragement?
Yes, I think I would end off with a note that this is a conversation that all of us should actively be involved in all the time throughout this year, because this is our children, this is our society that we are looking to protect, and every single one of us has a stake in that. So that's what I'd like to leave the audience with, is just to get involved, get out there, and let's try and make a change.
Thank you. Thank you for the change that you make. And you just gave me goosebumps, because something I heard this weekend as well, which is it's such an easy thing to say, but please hear it. My child is your child is my child. Every child is our child.
Yes.
And regardless if you know them or not, we need to look after them. Yeah. We need to look after each other. And there where you are, whether it's at work tomorrow, whether it is in your family, please, let's raise the awareness about this. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure that we identify it. Let's make sure that we stand up for someone else who might not have a voice or who might be too afraid. Let's be there for them. Thank you so much for listening tonight. As always, I would like to say, travel safely in cyberspace, use your fingertips wisely, and be the light online. Have a fantastic week. And next up is your Santon Times Hour with Alexander.
Say cheese!
Put a smile on your